This is the life history of Patricia Frances Black Stratton as told to her son Clifford James Stratton at a family reunion on June the 29th, 1979 at Winslow, Arizona. Mom, tell us some of your early childhood remembrances.
Was to build things out in the dirt, you know, build little tunnels and roads for cars, and I was a tomboy. I mean, I'd build a playhouse and play in the playhouse, or I'd build a fort and get all the neighborhood kids and we'd play in the fort. One of the best memories was every summer we used to go visit my great-grandmother Hughes, Margarita Hughes, and she had pomegranate trees and apricot trees and mulberry trees and a gorgeous rose garden. And we used to play out there all the time. And then the best thing was to take a book and go up in one of the fruit trees, the pomegranate tree or the apricot tree or the mulberry tree, and take a book and a pillow and sit up there and eat fruit and read. I still like to do that. And I used to like to play hide and seek. We had a great big on 4th Street.
Your home was here in Winslow?
Yeah, where I lived in Winslow on 4th Street. My parents lived there from the time I was just born until I was in the 4th grade when Mother and Daddy built their new home on Maple. And we had a great big grape arbor. And I spent all my time that I could playing in there, reading and playing and building things. I loved to do things like that.
Now the home on Maple was on Maple or Campbell, right?
Maple and Camel.
And
Mother,
4th Street, where was that at?
That was on 100, it was probably 100 4th Street. And I don't know what else was always religious. I'd be the only one up in the morning, and I'd get up and tiptoe out, and then I'd take turns going to churches, and I was just a little tiny thing. And the first time, there was just 2 blocks down, I knew I could walk to that. I just walked in and sat down. And I'd find one, oh, I can walk to that one, so I'd get up and I'd sleep out of the house. I'd walk down and I'd go to that church. And then finally, when I was Rainbow Girl, I finally had a religion. That was my religion, because Rainbow Girls, they talked about love, hope, charity, faith. And to me, that was just my religion. And so they had different stations, and I had every one of those stations. And then they had state officers, and I had every state office they had, because I was so, that was my whole, you know, I just loved it. And Betty and I used to have a lot of fun together. We used to giggle a lot. We had our aunts. Aunt Elizabeth lived with us a lot. My Aunt Sis lived with us a lot. And we used to find more things to giggle about. And we had a great big round table with huge legs coming up on the bottom. And we'd play house in those round tables. And one night we got to those and we thought something was at the foot of our bed. We were afraid to put our feet down. We spent all night long with our feet and our head both up on the pillows. We were so silly, but we'd laugh and play and sing, and our aunts are always mad at each other, always mad. And so Betty and I decided we never in our whole life would ever be mad at each other, and we never were. We never fussed. Of course, at times I'd want to tag along, because I was just a little sister. But we never really fussed, you know. That was normal. That was a normal thing. And I always had to entertain her boyfriends. She was the most popular girl in school. She was so popular. I was a tomboy and the swimmer and the baseball and all the sports, and I couldn't care less for boys. But Betty was so gorgeous and beautiful and talented. And every boy that ever looked at her was in love with Betty. You could ask anybody in Winslow now, and they'll tell you the same thing. Her pallbearers at her funeral were all boys that had been in love with her. Every one of them that she'd gone to school with. And she and I used to have the most fun. But anyway, these boys would come from out of town to visit Betty, and sometimes we'd have 3 and 4, and Betty was always so slow, and so nothing ever disturbed her, you know. And if she was home all right or if she wasn't all right, and here I'd sit entertaining these guys. It was fun. But it wasn't just, it was all through the years. She had boys that would come year after year after year after year. She was a lovely person. She was so talented, and she, in fact, composed the high school song and the junior high song, and they still sing them. She was a composer. She could sit down at the piano and just compose and make up a song. Very talented. Write beautifully. She always had such a sense of humor. I was so serious all the time, but she had the best sense of humor. She could laugh out of the worst thing in the world that could happen to you. Instead of crying about it, feeling depressed, I've never seen her depressed. She'd just make a joke out of it. One time she didn't want to live on the ranch, and the chickens were just coming in and out of the house, and instead of getting cross about it and thinking, oh, chickens, get out of here, she said, look, I don't mind the chickens in around the house, but when they get up here and start roosting all over my head, then I draw the line. But she was that way in everything.
Was Betty ever very religious?
No, I was the only religious one in the family.
How about your mom and dad?
Maybe they were in their own ways, but we never went to church. We never went to church. I was a churchgoer. I always had a feeling inside of me, that spiritual feeling. And I had prayers answered way when I was little. When I was going to the University of Arizona. I believe I've told you this. I wanted to go to church so bad. So I just prayed about it, and went in to eat dinner that afternoon, and some young fellow was standing behind me, and we got to talking and joking, and out of the clear blue sky, he said, hey, would you like to have my car sometime? And I said, could I have it Sunday mornings? He says, oh, sure. He says, I work late Saturday nights, and he says, when I go to work, I'll just park it in the college parking lot and give you, and you can have the keys, and you can have it all day Sunday. So every Sunday morning, I'd get a whole gang of girls, and we'd go, as many as could fit in the car, and a whole bunch of us would get in the car, and we got to be a real religious group. We'd go to church every Sunday, and then we'd study together, and we'd pray together. That's the first time I ever prayed with people. And I got some of the closest friends, and we got real spiritual at school. I think that's the age you do anyway sometimes. And we'd go down in the basement and find an empty room where they store things, you know, and we'd study, and we'd talk, and we'd pray, and then every Sunday morning we'd go to church. It was a beautiful experience. Really nice. And so,
tell me about your dad being a mayor and growing up as the mayor's daughter. And I know Grandma was very high society.
Yeah.
Tell me how that affected your life.
Well, I'll tell you, I think I went to the extremes. I didn't like it. We were so high society, the most high society family in town. Daddy was mayor and Mother was so elegant and everything. And I kind of rebelled. I didn't like to, because highfalutin people talk kind of down with people. And I love people, and I don't know, I never felt right about, like we'd go to a restaurant and they'd complain of the waitress and make fun of somebody and talk about people, talk about gossip. These highfalutin people, when they get together, they just gossip and gossip. And I thought, I just don't want to go on, and I don't want to live like this. And so I kind of rebelled, and so just when I got out of high school, I went to work and say, you know, when you're a jeweler's daughter, you're either real rich or you don't have much money, because people don't want jewelry. And so the times when we were short of money was right after the Depression. And I don't think anybody in the United States had any money then, except maybe the railroaders. It didn't affect them. But it affected the jewelry business. So I went to school. I went to work at the telephone office and saved enough money to go to school for a semester, for a year. And then I decided I wasn't going to be high society. I was just going to be me. And so I took jobs that we used to laugh at. I mean, I went to work as a waitress in the drugstore, you know, and then I took this nurse's aides course. I didn't want to get, I can't explain it, but I didn't want to get on that high level anymore. I didn't like it, really didn't like it, because it wasn't natural. It wasn't natural. But anyway, then I'd come home and I'd work and save some more money. Then I worked at the drugstore and had charge of the whole dining area. And the manager from Sears came. He used to come over and have his dinner there. Breakfast and have his dinner. And so every day he'd say, I want you to come over and work for me. And I thought he was kidding. And he said it so much. And one day he says, look, you've got to come over and work for me. You just tell your boss right today you're quitting. So I said, well, I thought you'd been kidding me. So I told, my boss was mad. He says, you can't quit me. He says, you're in charge of all this dining area. Because I was a good worker. But anyway, I went to work at Sears, and he made a big production out of it. He had a great big reminder. We got the daily reminder, you know, a little paper that distributed all over town. So he got a whole big sheet with my name on it, and it says, Patsy Black is manager of the sales order department at Sears Roebuck. Come see her. So he had me a little office space and put manager in front. I was manager of the mail order department. And then when I worked for the phone office, the manager of that, he says, I don't want you to work the switchboard. I want you to come over here and work in the office and be my secretary. So he had me a desk with my name on it. Secretary of the telephone company. And his desk was right here by me. Well, to tell you a little about my teenage years, and my first boyfriend you asked me about, well, I used to go swimming out at Clear Creek, and we used to go, we'd hitch a ride out. One of our parents would take us out, because we weren't old enough to drive, and so a whole carload, or maybe 4 or 5 carloads of kids would go out to the creek. They'd come in all day long out to the creek. And we'd stay all day. And we all knew that there'd be half a dozen cars come out about sundown and bring us all back. Well, there was one young boy that used to come visit his family every summer. And I got acquainted with him out at the creek, and his name was Tommy. And so I must have been in junior high. And every summer he'd come, we'd have fun, and he'd go back home, and every summer he'd come back again. And then when I got to be, was in 7th grade, he came and moved here, and we started going together. And I went with him for 6 years. And one time when I was going to university, he came back and he proposed to me, but I would like to have said yes, but I wasn't in love with him. He was just a boy to have fun with, you know. And then I got 2 proposals the same week. And some guy, I came home from school, was standing up waiting for me, he grabbed my hand and stuck an engagement ring on my finger.
Well, how did you meet him? Who was he?
He was in high school. He was the president of the high school. And
you dated him in high school?
I dated him in high school. And I didn't realize he was serious. He wanted, and he wanted me to move with him to Holbrook. I couldn't. I'd like to. He was real nice, but I wasn't in love with him. The only man I've ever loved was Grandpa. My Cliff. And you just know. And my parents' store, the drugstore I worked in, was on the corner of 2nd Street and Kinsley, and my mother and dad's store was right next to it. Mother had her dress shop, and Daddy had his jewelry store. And at noon, I would bring their meals into them, right into the back of the store. It was kind of fun, because I'd just come in, visit with Mother and Daddy, and he'd bring their lunch and have lunch with them every day. And Daddy always took us fishing and camping, and we had one special place at Greer in Benny Creek. We went there every summer. It was nice, even when we got married and had children. And I took my children there so they could see where Benny was, and it became such a favorite that Carol was just telling me yesterday. She said she used to, when she'd see another camp, somebody else camped in our favorite spot, she'd just almost get mad. They're in our spot. And
Grandma and Grandpa first started taking you there when you were a little girl.
When I was a little girl, and we'd go fishing in the Greer Lake. Said, have you ever heard the story of your grandpa being drowned? Well, it was that we were camped at Benny Creek, and like Betty and I were just youngsters. We weren't in high school, and it was sort of a family outing. My grandfather, Treat, he'd had a stroke on one side, so he was walking with a cane, and he didn't have use of one side. He was with us, and my grandmother Treat, and my Aunt Sis and her husband, Lynn Hobson. And we were all together, and the men decided to go fishing. So they all got in the boat, my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle. They got a little ways out and realized they had left their worms at the shore. Couldn't fish without worms. So I don't know why, but my Uncle Slim stood up. And when he stood up, the boat capsized. And my dad's foot got caught under the boat, and my father couldn't swim a stroke. Couldn't swim, never learned to swim. My Uncle Slim could swim real good, and he swam on the shore. Well, he started swimming, and everybody on the shore said, "Get Grandpa," because he had a stroke. Everybody went to get Grandpa, but my mother knew that my father didn't know how to swim, but she was an excellent swimmer. So she just went in with her watch, everything, just the way she was, and she swam right up to where the boat was, because you couldn't even see the boat. It was sinking. And she felt that my dad had his foot caught. So she took his foot out and swam him, pulled him to shore. And when he was at shore, everybody thought he was dead. Not my mother. She says, "He's not." She says, "Betty, you get on this leg. Pat, you get on this leg. Slim, you hold his tongue," and had everybody pumping something, his arms and his legs. And we pumped water just like a waterfall coming out. And she says to her sister, my Aunt Sis, she says, "Sis, you go get a doctor." So my Aunt Sis made her own roads. She just she had to go 18 miles. So she headed and got a doctor. And we saved Daddy's life. He was, I guess he was in the hospital about 6 weeks because he got pneumonia. But he did live. But that was quite an exciting experience for all of us.
Did you go fishing quite often as a family? Where else did you go besides Benny Creek?
My dad loved the outdoors. He could tell you the name of every canyon around here. He can tell you where every black walnut tree is, where every grapevine is, where every good fishing hole is, where every good turkey place is, where every good deer place is, and he has taken us to every one of them. We used to go in the canyons and gather black walnuts in the fall. We used to go and gather grapes, wild grapes in the fall. We used to go fishing in the summertime, and we used to go out hunting turkeys, and my dad loved the outdoors. We did an awful lot. And my mother loved parties. I guess that's why I just loved to have parties too. I always did. I'd come home in junior high, I'd say, Mother, I want to have a party. And she'd say, okay, go ahead. So I'd invite the kids and make the refreshments and have the party. Because I saw my mother doing it, you know, and she was a very gracious hostess. And, of course, all of our aunts and our relatives were kind of high society, so they, you know, they had maids, and they'd ring the bell, and the maids would come in, and so we...
So you had maids in your home?
Yeah, we always had a maid. See, my mother worked, and my father worked, and we always had a maid all the time.
They both worked in the jewelry store?
Until Mother, about 20 years, Mother had her dress shop about 20 years.
Tell me about all your swimming badges. I've seen numerous newspaper clippings and medals that you won for swimming. Tell us about your love for swimming.
Oh, I loved this. Went to all the swim meets. I broke my records even. I won everything swimming because how could I help? I lived out the creek for 20 years, and then in Winslow, you know, girls. They didn't used to have girl athletic teams like we do now. But when I was a senior, we just begged and begged our principal to let us enter the state meet. And he says, there aren't any of you there. There's not enough girls. But there was 2 of us. And I says, well, there's 2 of us. He says, okay, you 2 go ahead and go. So we went and represented Winslow, the 2 of us. And we won. And the relay race we both get together and just laugh our heads off about this, but we wanted to enter. We entered everything, just the 2 of us. And here, all the other schools had all the other people. But anyway, we didn't have the 6 kids that took the relay, but we did it this way. She'd run one, and then I'd run one, and she'd hurry up and get up over here, and then she'd run the other one. Then I'd run one, and she'd hurry up, and we came in second.
In the relay, 2 of you.
And we came in. We did the jump over the high jump, then the relay. We came in. We scored in everything we entered.
Was this a track meet?
It was a track meet, a girls' track meet, state girls' track meet. We laugh about that. We get together.
Who was the other girl?
Her name is Brown, and my name is Black.
Brown and Black.
But we played. Then we talked him into letting us have girls basketball. So we played that girls basketball. You know, physical education for girls was just walking around the school. Well, she and I just love sports, so we talked him into letting us have a girls' basketball team, and we did. And then when I went to the University of Arizona, they asked me to be cheerleader. The freshmen had to go up and perform for their. They thought it was silly, you know. They thought they were going to embarrass all the freshmen. See, I was cheerleader for junior high and high school. Almost 8 years. I was the only cheerleader they had in Winslow High School. And so I don't know how it happened, but to embarrass me on freshman week at the university, they told me to get up in front of the whole audience and lead a yell. Well, I didn't have any trouble at all. I've been doing it for 8 years, so I just got up and, come on, lead a yell. So they asked me if I'd be a university cheerleader. And then when I went to the swimming deal, they were getting ready for their swim meet, and so they asked me if I'd perform that, and that was fun because we'd go in the water and we'd make designs. We'd all go float around and we'd float back, and then we'd dive under, and we had pretty things, and we made designs for it, and then we had all these people come and watch this swim meet. It was real pretty. And then we had dives, and I got to go dive every place.
Did you like diving off the high board?
Yeah. I used to dive off the bridge on Clear Creek.
That's a high bridge. That must be, how many feet high is that?
It's a long way up there, but it didn't bother us. We just did it like it was natural.
Wow. So did you do twists and all of that?
All that. We did the works. We did everything there was to do. And flip. I'd come home from school, and Mother had a couch, and I just flip, make half a dozen flips over the couch. I must have been hyperactive when I think about it, because I couldn't sit still. I was either doing cartwheels or doing flips or playing ball or swimming or doing something like that. And my sister was so smart and elegant, beautiful, talented.
Sounds like you were.
Mother and I were the workers. Daddy could never do anything because he had to be careful with his hands. So he never hammered a hammer or anything. I never saw him out of a suit. He always was just dressed beautifully, you know. And Betty was too, very elegant. But if there was painting to do, Mother and I we'd do all the painting, all the scrubbing, all the waxing the floors, all the work that was done in the houses. Mother and I did.
And your maid.
Yeah. Well, when I was in the 4th grade, my parents decided to, since my father was mayor, that they would have to do a lot of entertaining. So they built this gorgeous, beautiful Spanish-style home. And Mother had this great, big, huge living room so that people could dance and it could hold more people. And so that Betty and I could have parties and entertaining.
And this was on Maple and Campbell?
On Maple and Campbell, 600 West Maple Street. And my father, being mayor, entertained a lot of people would come through, you know, like Lynn Bird, he talked, and the governors, and being mayor, he had to visit with a lot of people, you know. And then my mother had entertained a lot. They belonged to quite a few supper clubs and golf clubs and, you know, those kind of things. So they entertained a lot. And we, even one time, our home was selected, it was one of the, well, it was known to be one of the most beautiful homes in Winslow at that time. And so a movie company asked if they could make a movie at our home. So it was made into a movie. We had our big doors opened onto a patio in the Spanish-style home, and people, I remember seeing these movie people. They would dance through the big windows and come out on the patio, and then they'd dance back in, and it was pretty fancy, you know.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah. Still have a lot of Mother's beautiful dishes in silver, and I don't know which one of you kids are going to use it, because one of you is going to have to be high society so you can have it.
Okay.
Well, to be specific about the places, for instance, where our store, Mother and Daddy's store was on Kinsley and 2nd Street. It's the 2nd and 3rd houses, 2nd and 3rd buildings. The drugstore's on the front, and then my mother's dress shop and the jewelry shop is right into where the Reminder is now.
So that's the northeast side of that corner?
Yes.
Okay.
And the school is the same school that all 4 of you children went to school, was Washington School, and it's still Washington School. They're thinking now about replacing it. They just keep patching it up. And it is on Winslow and Winslow Avenue, and the street where the old church was. What was that? Berry.
Yeah, Berry.
Winslow and Berry. And then the Washington School takes up 1 block. That's elementary school. Then the next grades are right in the next block, and that's Lincoln School. And that's still there, and that's where I went to Lincoln School. In junior high, is where you used to go as Wilson School. It used to be Wilson School.
That's gone now, isn't it?
No, they remodeled it too. It was condemned for many, many years. But that's where we went to junior high.
Where's that located?
That's also one. That's right, the street right by the swimming pool. That must be Maple Street.
Oh, yeah.
Just a block from the swimming pool.
Okay.
And the high school is on, not Prairie.
Well, we all know where the high school is.
High school. That's real. And all you kids went to the same school as I did, and some of you had some of the same teachers I had.
Uh-huh.
in high
Who were
school.
some of your teachers?
Oh, Miss Orr. You had Miss Orr.
Carolina McMahon had Miss
Miss
Orr.
Whetstone. I think you all. She was my kindergarten teacher.
Uh-huh.
Miss Curry. You had Miss Curry. Miss Evans. She was a literature teacher. Right. Mr. Coach Wilson. Coach Wilson was, he was the coach. Anyway. Well, back to my father. Is that enough specific places? Oh, where we swim at Clear Creek. Right west of the bridge, down maybe about 25 feet, there was a real sandy spot. And that's
Bishop Frances Black telling her own story, a few reminiscences of her life.
another favorite place for when Mother and Daddy would go with us was down by the dam at Clear Creek. My father was mayor, and he had him put up a house for people to change their clothes, a bathhouse. Then there was a concession stand there, and my mother always made homemade ice cream and took us out. My mother always took us out. She knew how we loved to go swimming, so she'd always take us out to the creek and take a picnic lunch. You know, it took a long, long time to go any place in a car then. It used to take us about 12 hours just to go from here to Phoenix. And now we go in 3.5. You know, 40 miles an hour was speeding. Oh, you were going off fast. Those cars wouldn't go very fast. We used to go in Model T, Fords. My dad had an old, beautiful car, and it was, instead of glass, it was eyes and glass windows, and little tiny tires, and we were always getting stuck. And to start it, my dad had to get in the front and crank it. And sometimes the crank it, let loosen it, just go right around as fast as could be. And more people broke their arms cranking their cars.
You always had electricity in your home?
Oh yeah, we always had. Now your daddy didn't. My first visit there, they didn't have an inside toilet. It's kind of embarrassing. And you know what happened when we were first married? My mother-in-law, I'd met her for the first time after we were married. We'd married 2 days, and I met my mother-in-law for the first time. She says, I bet you'd like to have a nice hot bath. So she brought a great big tub in, filled it with hot water, and stuck it in the living room, and says, your bath's ready.
And this high society's daughter. That was different.
I was so afraid somebody was going to walk in. That's how I had my bath.
Okay, tell us about Grandpa's improvements, what he thinks were
my
his.
father was responsible for putting the paved streets in Winslow. It used to be muddy and dusty. He'd sit at his workbench and he'd say he'd be so tired of watching the women and the children go across that street. It was so muddy and so dusty. The wind must have been terrible in Winslow. So when he was mayor, that was one of the first things he did. Then the second thing he did, he knew how much I liked to swim, and he says, I'm going to put a pool in this town for all the young kids. So he's responsible for the swimming pool that's here that we have right now. In fact, we went out there the night before it was to open. He says, here, I want you to be the first one in the pool. And he and his council members, they all pushed me in. I was the first one to be in the first one to swim in the pool with all my clothes on. And my father was the first one to find out if we had good water and good soil. And if they could have followed through, he would have had more water for Winslow. But they couldn't afford, this town couldn't afford it. He made a lot of improvements. He put a park. Grandpa used to play in the band. He used to play his trombone. So right over there, next to the railroad tracks, on First Street, about the 300 block, my dad had a bandstand built and trees planted and a park. And many, many a night we'd go over there and listen to my dad play his trombone, and we'd have our picnic out. And it was such a little town that everybody was there. And we just played in our neighborhood. There was about 10 families, and we had all kinds of playmates. How did I meet your daddy? I was working in the drugstore. You see, I would work in the summer times, and then I'd go to school in the winter time. And your dad...
This is in Tucson.
No, here in I would go to school at Tucson, and the Los Angeles City College in California too. It's now Los Angeles Junior College. They've changed it. So your dad had been teaching school here for 2 years, and I hadn't met him because I would be working in the summer, and he'd be gone in the summer, and then I'd be gone in the winter when he'd come back to teach school. So I didn't have enough money to go back one semester, so I decided I'd go ahead and work another semester. So I had 2 jobs. I'd work at the drugstore from 7 o'clock in the morning and get off at 3. Then I'd work go cashier at the theater from 7 till about 11:30. Then I had 2 jobs. And your dad is a school teacher. Used to come into the Central Drug for his lunch, and that's how I kind of saw him first time there. But then the next few days after I had first seen him in the drugstore, there was a big dance. We used to have a big rodeo here every fall, and everybody went to the rodeo dance. So I went to the rodeo dance. I had a date. And in those days, it wasn't fun to have dates. Never fun for me to have a date. I had more fun without a date. And if you go to a dance without a date, you had more fun because everybody would come and ask you for a dance and say, well, you can have the 10th, 11th, 50th, 60th, 70th, and on up to almost 100 sometimes, you know. Everybody would want to dance. So that's the way it was. So I had I think when your daddy came and asked me for a dance, and so I think you have about the 50th or something like that. He says, I want to dance tonight. You know your dad. Didn't you just see him saying that? And so I didn't care. I would dance with somebody else. You know, I was there to have fun. And the fellow the next dance, the fellow that I had was the guy that runs the Reminder right now, Brent Benham. He had stepped out. The boy stepped out to have a smoke or something. I don't know what they went out there for, but anyway, several of them would go out between dances, and he came back in, and too late. The dance had already started, and your dad came over and started dancing with me, and we danced every dance the rest of the dance. And then he invited me out to dinner, and a show, and oh, it was nice. So we went out to the show and to dinner. The next day I went to work, and my friend Emma Lucy, I worked with, said, how'd you like him? And I said, so I'm going to marry him. I'm in love with him. And we dated. Neither one of us dated anybody else. 9 months later we were married. It was the most beautiful romance. I used to live it over and over and over and over and over. It was so gorgeous, so perfect.
Where were some of the places they took you?
Oh, we used to go to Flag, to the dances and shows. We double date, take some of our friends, and we had kind of a little gang that we ran around with, you know. And we'd have parties at Mother's house, and we'd take the old Indian rugs and we'd slide all the length of the hall, and then we'd build a fire in the fireplace and sit around the fireplace.
And this was in your home?
Uh-huh. And the first night, that we, you know, $25 used to be about as much as $1,000 right now. And our first date, they used to call people's names at the show. You know, the money would build up, and they called his name for $25. He would have had $25 if he hadn't had a date with me that night. We had a lot of fun. Oh, we had a gorgeous, it was so beautiful. I just loved him so much. And 9 months later, he asked me to marry him. But the night that he asked me to marry him, he explained to me all about his religion. And he said, he explained it to me, told me what it was. Of course, I didn't understand a thing he said, because I was so in love. And he said, I'll go with you, to your church if you want me to. But I'd like for you to try mine. And so we were married in the Episcopal Church. It was gorgeous. My mother went to so much work. She had these candelabrias made, and then she gave them to the church, and she had beautiful flowers. First we had an announcement party of our engagement. Everything was done proper. Remember, my mother was very proper in high society. So everything was done in just the way it was supposed to be. So we had little engraved cards that Patricia Stratton was engaged, announcing the engagement to Clifford Stratton. And all our friends came in that beautiful big room. And Mother had it so beautiful, beautifully decorated, and such beautiful refreshments. So we announced our engagement. And then we had the wedding at the Episcopal Church. It was
How come you chose that church?
That's the church, kind of my I can't ever remember going to church with my parents. I think that's the one that maybe my mother favored. And then she had this beautiful reception at their home. Afterwards, then we went to Flagstaff and spent the first night. Then the second night we went and met his family.
Up in
Utah, in Hinckley, Utah. You know the house where you went to last year, and it was all torn down and deserted. That was the place where I first met your grandmother Stratton. I don't know what else to say.
Share with us your parents' impressions about Dad, and then what you can remember thinking that your in-laws thought about you.
Oh, my parents loved your dad. They just thought he was the grandest person they'd ever met. They were just so happy. And your daddy, of course, he knew how proper they wanted things, and so he after he asked me to marry him, then he properly went to my father and my mother and asked them if they'd come in and sit down. He'd like to talk to them. He asked them if they would let him marry me. And of course, they kind of, I think they knew what was coming anyway. We had a wonderful courtship, and they really did like him. But I don't know what his parents thought of me, because I was so scared that I was going to do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, that I didn't say anything, and I was so shy, and I just kind of sit, and I wasn't even myself when I went to visit them. Well,
your early married life.
Well, while we were still engaged, I was working at Sears, and your daddy was teaching school in Muswell High School. He was teaching commercial subjects, and I was working at Sears in the catalog department. And a friend of mine came in and said she was building an apartment, and I says, "Oh, can I have it?" She said, "Well, sure." And I says, "I'm getting married." She said, "Well, of course you can have it." You just pick out everything you want. You pick out the colors, you pick out the curtains, the drapes, and you can move in when you get married. So, it was just like my own little home. I picked out everything, the curtains, I knew the colors and everything that was going in there. It was just decked like a little dollhouse. And we fixed the yard and we planted flowers. We just worked so hard on that little house. And so we went on our honeymoon, and when we came back...
Where'd you go on your honeymoon? Tell us about your honeymoon.
We had a beautiful honeymoon. We went, it was so sweet, the day we were married, when we were driving off, your dad opened my hand and put a $50 bill in it. Now that was like $1,000 today. And that was the first money he ever gave me. So sweet of him. We went to Flag, and after we visited his folks, then we went to Bryce and Zion, the Grand Canyon. We just had a beautiful, beautiful honeymoon. We just went all kinds of places. Visited and saw so many interesting things. But when we came back, our house wasn't ready yet. The little apartment wasn't quite finished.
What was the apartment?
It was right by your Washington school.
Across the street?
Just across the street.
Which way? To the...
The second house in the back. It wasn't facing the school. It was on Winslow Avenue. And so we stayed with my parents about 10 days till the apartment was finished. And then we moved into our new apartment. It was so lovely. And I remember the manager of Sears came and wanted me to come back to work. And your daddy says, no, my wife isn't going to work. I've always kind of been sorry because with both of us working, we could have had build us a pretty new home. But anyway, then we lived there until then I was expecting we were expecting our first child. We'd been married 2 years when we found out we were going to have Carol Ann, which was real funny in the way I felt. We always had a maid at home, you know. Her name was, one of them was, I forgot her name. But anyway, I told Mother how terrible I felt, and she said, oh, you've got pleurisy. So my mother would put mustard plasters on me, trying to get rid of this pleurisy that I had. And the maid said, pleurisy, she gonna cry. And sure enough, I was pregnant, you know, instead of me having pleurisy. And pleurisy cried, all right. And we had, the lady that owned that house also owned the big house in front. So she said we could have the big house. So we moved into the big house. But before Carol Ann was born, while I was in the hospital with Carol Ann, the lady sold the house. And so your daddy and your grandma had to scout around Winslow and find us a house, which wasn't easy to do. So we found a little tiny house right across from the high school, right straight across from the high school. And that's where we lived until we were expecting our second baby, Cliff. And when I went into the hospital to have that house was sold. And so here my mother and dad were again hunting for a house. And so they moved into this house. It was during the war. There wasn't a house to be had anywhere. And Daddy had to be down at the railroad when...
Which war?
The World War II. And in fact, you were born the day after President Roosevelt died. And so he heard about this house, and the man had to leave because his wife was ill. So there was about 10 people wanted this house. Daddy had first bid on it. So he took it. I mean, it was too small, old. It's nothing what we would ever dream of having for a home, for our family. We had no choice. This was it. So Mother and your daddy moved me in here. I got out of a lot of work, didn't I? And so when I came home with my new baby into this house, actually, that isn't exactly how it worked. Carol Ann was 19 months old. We moved here in February, and you were born in April.
In April.
In April. That's the way it worked.
And this house is at 314 Campbell, and since you purchased the house, Dad has added on 2 bedrooms and a bath in the back, enlarged the front room and dining area, and he's also put in a carport.
And we've remodeled all inside, all new walls and everything. However, during the war, you see, we had a property down in Phoenix, a big ranch that we were in. We had my mother and father, my sister and her husband, and your daddy and I. We all owned this big ranch down in Phoenix, and we could not decide whether to sell our home and put the money into the ranch, and move down there, or what to do. But it was a little risky, and here we were with the family, and we had talked about it, we prayed about it, and we thought perhaps it was not a good thing, which it turned out it wasn't a good thing because they ran out of water. But right now the place is worth millions.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But at the time, and so when we sold the ranch, we had some extra money, and we thought, well, now we'll build our home. Well, we couldn't find a lot, and then during the war you couldn't buy any materials to build a home, so we just ended up staying right here. We've regretted that many times, that we didn't go build us a pretty new home. We could have bought my mother and dad's home. We missed it by one day. We were in Phoenix, and we met some people down there, and they told us this house was for sale. So we called up, and we asked that lady, Mrs. Merrifield, if we could buy this house. And she said, oh, you're just a day late. She says, I sold it yesterday. Otherwise, we would have moved into my old home.
And so Margaret and Chuck were both born here at 314 Campbell.
Yes, Margaret and you. You and Margaret and Chuck. Your father almost missed the wedding. He was staying with, he had a room in a home, and the best man forgot to go get him. And the man who he was rooming with was sitting out in the audience, and he was in church, and he kept thinking, where's Cliff? You know, and everybody was thinking, where's Cliff? And where's Cliff? And he thought, oh, I'm going to go find out where Cliff is. And sure enough, he went to the house, and there was Cliff. He had just started out walking in his white pants and white shoes, and he looked so nice. But they had forgotten to go get him.
So he was late for the wedding.
So he was late for the wedding.
What did he think about that?
Oh,
what did you think about that?
We were both nervous.
All right. About the religious side.
About the religious side, I always felt I must have been born religious, because I always wanted to be religious and be spiritual. I remember I've always had a lot of my prayers answered, many times, even before I was in the church. One time when I was at the University of Tucson, before this boy they offered me his car, one morning I just prayed. I just felt like I had to go to church. And the phone rang, and it was a boy that I'd met, had gone swimming with several times, and he invited me to go to church with him and he and his mother. So every Sunday then, I went with he and his mother until this boy offered me his church, you know. But I was just kind of like I was just searching, because I went to every church there was. There was 2 churches that I stayed away from after the first time. I got scared at the Mary Baker Eddy's church, the Christian Scientist Church. I went in there, and it was quiet. Nobody said anything. And it kind of scared me, and I never went back. The other church was the Church of Christ, and this was when I was expecting you, and Carol Ann was just about a year old. And you know how little year-old children, when they hear music, they want to dance and jump and sway. Well, my neighbor was the Church of Christ, and she was visiting me that afternoon, and we had the radio on, and some real pretty dance music came on, and Carol Ann started dancing and swaying, you know, and twirling around, and Miss Eiler says, "She is sinning. It's a sin to dance to music." So that was the end of the Church of Christ for me, because I'd gone a lot of times with Mrs. Eiler. But every time I went to at every church there was, but there was something lacking, and I was searching. I had the deepest need for spirituality in my life, but I never found it until I joined the Mormon Church. Just couldn't find it. Now ask me some more.
Well, tell me about.
My parents had always been religious in their way, and had never discouraged me from going to church. Any church I wanted to go, they were behind me. When I started dating a Mormon, my father had always, many times, had said, "Now you girls, I don't want you marrying a Mormon or a Catholic now. You just don't marry them." So, but they changed their mind when they met your daddy, because they just loved him so much, though they didn't know anything about Mormonism. But they respected that I was marrying me for marrying a Mormon, and so they never interfered. My mother and father never did interfere with. If that was my choice, they were behind me 100%. Then, but I was very slow to be converted to Mormonism. I was married 8 years before. I don't know why and what took me so long, but
Dad wasn't active either, was he?
Daddy wasn't active, and he never went to church.
Uh-huh.
But one day Carol Ann says, "Mother, are we going to your church or Daddy's church or Mrs. Eiler's church this morning?" And that was a rude awakening to me. But here we have this beautiful little child, and you were a little baby, and I wasn't doing anything with you. And so one Sunday morning, the whole day Sunday, I did nothing but just pray and cry and wonder what to do. What should I do? Here, our family was just not organized spiritually. So I told your daddy when he came home, I said, "I'm going to start taking our children to your church, and I want to see what it's all about." I said, it's no good this way. So I started taking the children with your daddy to the Mormon church. I didn't feel comfortable there at first at all. I didn't understand the fast and testimony meetings, and people weren't friendly. They just weren't friendly.
Was it just a small branch?
Just a small, but
what was the church house? What did it look like?
It's the one on Berry and Maple, the old church house. It was a nice church house.
People were very friendly.
They weren't friendly at all, and it was hard for me to go back each Sunday too. But then I got so that I knew there were 3 women over there that were just lovely to me. Helen Sullivan Campbell, and Pauline McFetridge, and another girl that hasn't lived here for years and years. But they were so sweet to me. They just, and you children, they just took your children under the wing and showed you where to go, and were very good. And, you know, my children were the most important things in my life. And if anybody was kind to my children, that was very important to me, very impressive, because I would do anything or fight anybody for my children. And my whole life, I just love my children more than, I can't even tell you how much I love you. I just can't tell you, it's so deep, just beautiful. And you're all so special. You're so wonderful. I'm so proud of every one of you. And so we started going to the Mormon church, but I wasn't converted. And of course, once I started, and now I know, then comes the missionaries, and then comes the home teachers. And they never let me know when they came, and they would knock on the door, and I'd have a sick baby in one arm, I'd have one baby in a bathtub, and one baby crying, and here would be the doorbell. And I resented that. I was raised where you made appointments, you called and then asked if you would come. That was just my raising. And I resented them, and I wasn't very nice to them sometimes, because my children came first. And if I had to feed a child or put a child to bed or get one out of the bathtub, they came first. And I didn't care about anybody else in the whole wide world, but my kids, they came first. And so I wasn't very nice to the missionaries, but they kept coming.
Now, who were the missionaries? Art Tanner was one, wasn't he?
Well, usually it was the bishop and his counselors, and then Art Tanner. He was so faithful. He was so sweet and so faithful. And he was so sweet, and he'd come over and he'd just sit while I was trying to calm down the children so I could listen to him talk, you know. And then I changed. It's because I didn't have the Spirit. I think you've got to, that happens, your attitude and your spirit. When you've got the Spirit of the Lord and you're praying about something, you're in a different ballpark than if you're not. And that has helped me, because I understand when we were on our mission, I sure had empathy for people that weren't members of this church. I knew what they were going through. And even though all these missionaries, and we went to all the Sunday school lessons and we studied, it never clicked with me until one evening, a friend of your dad that he'd gone to college with, he came by with his 7 children, and we were having stew, remember, and he came in and knocked, and he says, "Oh, I don't want to bring my family in. You're having your dinner." I says, "Oh, bring them in. We can always make stew stretch. We'd love to have you come in." So he and his wife and his 7 children came in, and I just loved that lady, and I just